To South Africa. As I mentioned at the very start, they held their general election on the 29th of May. And the ANC, the African National Congress, for the first time in 30 years, has been forced to form a government of national unity because they did not secure the majority. But Mzwandile Mbeje, who is the political editor, SABC, South African Broadcast Corporation, will tell us of the other instance when Nelson Mandela took office. But South Africa holds their general election every 5 years. The mode is proportional representation. What does that mean? It means this year they got 3 ballots for the National Assembly, for the provincial, that is the upper house of their parliament, as well as another for the wards, but they also included independents in a first. So they vote for the party, aside from where independents are concerned. So they vote for the party, and then the parties submit lists to the Independent Electoral Commission, although this happens prior to the actual election, and then the seats are proportionally distributed to the parties based on the votes they get. And the party lists are closed and cannot be altered by the voters. So they are ranked, the lists are ranked, and the higher you are on the list, as is the case here, the better the chance you have at occupying a seat in the parliament. Their system, as you heard earlier, is bicameral, and a total of 400 seats in the National Assembly. And the national list has 200. That means out of the 400, 200 are from the national list. The other 200 are from the 9 regions. As for the upper house, we have the National Council of Provinces, and we have 90 seats there. So in total, 490 seats, 10 for each province. But it is the National Assembly which elects the president from among its members. And it is from among the National Assembly members that once the president takes over, he appoints his cabinet. And this is how the parties performed. ANC, as I mentioned earlier, for the first time in 30 years, did not secure a majority, 40% Democratic of the vote. The Democratic Alliance, better known as DA, 22% of the vote. MK, which was backed by the former president, let me see if I can get this pronunciation right, Umkhonto Wesizwe, but we'll have the political editor, SABC, tell me whether I got it right or not. And there is the Economic Freedom Fighters, 9%, and I'm sure you are familiar with Julius Malema. All right, as I mentioned earlier, we are now joined by the political editor, SABC, and that is the South African Broadcast Corporation. And I know you laugh, I'm struggling a little with the names here, but Mzwandile Mbeje. Did I get it right?
You got that right.
Oh, fantastic.
You got that right, yes.
It took a lot of practice, I will not lie. But how much of a factor was Jacob Zuma in this election with the MK? Did he factor? Is he one of the reasons that the ANC did not secure a majority, in your view?
Well, a very good evening to the viewers. Indeed, the former president, as you've correctly asked, how much of a factor, I can stand here and say he effectively is the one who got the ANC out of power. You'd recall that in 2019, in the past 5 years, the ANC secured 57% of the vote, sufficient for it to form a government. You just need 50+1. So in this instance, the ANC dipped to 40%. And the former president's MK, Umkhonto Wesizwe party, you were very correct in pronouncing it, got 14%. You just counted those votes, you can see how much of a factor he is. Why I'm saying this? Because the Democratic Alliance, it's basically the vote that it got. It's traditionally what it normally gets. It's either 21%, 20%. So that vote seems to be very, very stable. And the EFF of Julius Malema last time in 2019 had got 10%. This time around, it regressed just a little bit. But if you look at the new hit on the block, which was the MK, so they got 14. So primarily, Olive, he is the reason why the ANC is not in power today.
Now, MK has said they will not even consider joining a government of national unity unless Cyril Ramaphosa resigns, which the ANC has ruled out. What options then does that leave the ANC?
Well, the options are quite clear because the ANC actually was very, very clever in how it approached this. The fact that they were not able to secure the majority that will enable them to form government, and the fact that they could actually choose to go with any of the parties, because they are at 40%, you just get the party which has more than that, or one or two parties, then you are able to form government. But I think the ANC really wanted to be seen as a party that is an adult in the room, which it has recognized that it was not endorsed by the people of South Africa, and none of the parties were endorsed in terms of governing on its own. So the ANC then decided to say, we will then look at what is best for the country. And then it came up with this proposal that, well, despite that, we can still form coalition, we would then prefer the government of national unity. So where we will invite almost all the parties to take part in the national interest. But as you know, not many parties are happy with each other because ideologically some of them are quite different. The DA last year, for example, during its campaign and even in its Congress, declared the EFF public enemy number one. So a party which it would never be able to work with. So clearly it becomes very difficult for those two parties to work together. So we have had the EFF say the same thing, to say, if we are invited into the government of national unity, so we are ready to go in there, provided there is no Democratic Alliance or the Freedom Front Plus, because in their view, they take those parties as racist. But because this is the government of national unity, so a lot more parties, if they participate, so it doesn't matter whether either of the party on the right or on the left participates, so they will be able to form government. So it's very curious what is happening at this stage. I mean, this weekend, it's talks galore. Everyone is speaking to themselves, speaking to other parties. So we will get to have a sense on Monday when the parties report back to say how far they've gone. Remember, Olive, we are actually left with not a lot of days because the election was declared on Sunday, the 2nd. So the Constitution says after the election has been declared, you have 14 days to constitute parliament. So just count now. So time is running out and they have got to agree so that government could be formed.
So this vote has to happen when Parliament is sworn in, because I read something about within 30 days, the Chief Justice would then decide when the election would take place for the President. Does that not extend or give them a little bit more of leeway?
Let me just clarify quickly to you for how it happens. After the election has been declared, it was declared on the 2nd of June. So you have 14 days to constitute Parliament, the National Assembly. Remember, in our case, the National Assembly elects the President. Right now, if you count from Sunday last week until today, you can see that there's not a lot of days that are remaining. So within these 14 days, the Chief Justice must convene the National Assembly. That National Assembly will be the one that will then elect the President. So in the event they are not able to do that, then, and 30 days lapses without anything being done, it's not necessarily the Chief Justice, it's the current President who has to dissolve Parliament and call for fresh elections. But I don't think we are there yet. As I've said, we will see what happens this week, because the Chief Justice is supposed to communicate to us as well when is he convening Parliament. And then my guess is that it's either going to be on Friday or Tuesday next week, because we have a public holiday on Sunday, Olive. So we would normally do it not necessarily on a public holiday. So if you look at the days that are remaining, so we don't have a lot of time to maneuver, I'm suspecting he probably will allow parties to try and negotiate amongst themselves, perhaps on Friday or Monday, or rather or Tuesday, then he convinced them, because at their first sitting, that's where they need to elect the president and, of course, and the speaker. So if all that fails, then that's the issue of the 30 days and the president then dissolves parliament.
All right. These ideological differences, is that why they have opted for a GNU as opposed to a coalition, do you think? We have had the EFF described as toxic by DA. EFF, somebody shared a tweet from Julius Malema that they will not share power with the enemy. So do you think this is why the ANC has opted to go the GNU route?
I think the ANC was placed in a very hard place. I mean, they were between a hard place and a rock. Because if they had decided to go with, let's say, the DA, for example, so there was already opposition from within the ANC itself. People are saying, no, but you can't go with the opposition, the DA. And then if you go with the EFF and the left-leaning parties, you also have the big chunk which is opposed to that. So the ANC was really in a very tight corner. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So what then they decided was that, okay, so that no one blames us, so let's then invite all of them. Let it be them who refuse to take part. But from its side, I think, as I was saying, it decided to be an adult in the room to say, I understand ideologically the EFF and the DA are different. But the fact of the matter is that the country is above everything else, so we have to act in the interest of the country. That's what the ANC was doing. It was trying to avoid being seen to be anti or in favor of the one or the other.
All right, Mzwandile, before I let you go, some of the issues that plagued the ANC this electoral cycle include corruption, power cuts, water shortages. Do you think the ANC will now sit up and listen?
Well, if they don't sit up and listen here, clearly it will be very difficult for them to regain power. I mean, the issue of load shedding, which you call power cuts, the issue of corruption in many instances, the issue of perhaps poor service delivery in many instances, and most importantly, the infighting within the ANC itself. That is why you have the former president, someone who led the ANC for decades, now deciding to form his own entity. So all those factors contributed to the ANC falling below. But of course, there's a lot that the ANC has done, which is positive for the country. But the fact of the matter is that South Africans felt it could do more. If it doesn't listen to what South Africans have said now, it will be very difficult. Remember, Olive, it's still the majority party. I mean, the second party to the ANC in terms of the votes is the Democratic Alliance at about 21%, the third 14%, and then fourth 9%. So clearly you can see, despite that it's not able to achieve the majority, it's still the party that most South Africans still believe is the real one.
All right, thank you very much for engaging us this evening. That is Mzwandile Mbeje, who is the political editor for the South African Broadcasting Corporation. We take a break, but coming up on the other side, that promised conversation on Raila Odinga's chances at the AUC chairmanship.